The woman across the table was crying, and Han Min-jun was already thinking about his next meeting. "I don't understand," she said, her voice breaking around the edges. 3 months. You said I was different." "I said you were beautiful," he corrected gently, sliding his sunglasses off the table. "I never said forever. If you have ever loved someone who could not love you back, if you have ever watched a charming man walk away without a scratch on him, then stay with me, because the man you are about to hate is going to spend this entire story learning what that feels like from the other side. Do me one favor first. Tap subscribe and drop a heart in the comments so more people find this story. Now let's begin." He left money on the table for both their coffees, because he was cruel but he was not cheap, and he walked out into the Seoul afternoon without looking back. Behind the glass, she had her face in her hands. By the time he reached his car, he had already forgotten her name. This was Han Min-jun, 31 years old, CEO of one of the most successful luxury fashion houses in Korea, and by every measure the city could invent a beautiful disaster. He had the kind of face that made strangers forgive him things. Sharp jaw, easy smile, eyes that made a woman feel like the only person in a crowded room right up until the moment he decided she wasn't. Money moved through his life like water. Women moved through it faster. They had a name for him in the gossip columns and the group chats and the whispered warnings passed between friends. The heartbreaker. He had earned it the honest way, one broken promise at a time. But here is the thing the columns never printed. Min-jun was not careless because he could not feel. He was careless because he had felt, once as a boy, watching his mother wait up at the window for a father who was always with some other woman. He had watched her make excuses, watched her shrink, watched love turn a strong woman into someone who apologized for wanting to be loved back. He had decided somewhere in that house, at some age too young to decide anything so permanent, that he would never be the one waiting at the window. He would be the one who left. If love was a game where someone always lost, he would simply make sure it was never him. So he played, and he was very, very good at it. That night, he did what he did most nights. He went to the most exclusive lounge in Gangnam, a place with no sign on the door and a waiting list a year long. And he did not wait. Women found him the way iron finds a magnet. He bought a round for a table of them, laughed at things that were not funny, let one rest her hand on his arm and did not move it away, and felt absolutely nothing at all. It was warm and bright and loud and empty, and it was exactly how he liked it. There he is. A hand clapped his shoulder. The most disappointing man in Seoul. Min-jun grinned without turning around. "Ji-hoon, you're late." Lee Ji-hoon dropped into the seat beside him. All easy energy and quick eyes, the kind of man who could make a funeral laugh. He was the glue of their little group, the one who remembered birthdays and smoothed over arguments and could not stay angry at anyone for longer than a sentence. He took one look at the women around the table and sighed like a tired uncle. "Which one are you ruining this week?" "I prefer the word entertaining." "They never do." Ji-hoon flagged a waiter. "You know one of them cried in my sister's salon last month? Full mascara situation. Over you. She didn't even know your last name." "Then it wasn't very serious, was it?" "That's the problem, Min-jun. It's never serious. Not for you." He said it lightly, the way you say a hard thing to a friend you love, wrapped in a joke, so it doesn't cut. One of these days somebody's going to get past that wall of yours, and you won't know what hit you. Min-jun raised his glass. "Impossible. I built it myself." The third chair scraped back, and Daniel Okafor sat down with the calm, heavy presence of a man who had never once in his life needed to raise his voice to be heard. Where Min-jun was flash and Ji-hoon was noise, Daniel was steady. A Nigerian engineer who had come to Korea for university a decade ago and never left, he was the responsible one, the anchor, the friend you called at 3 a.m. when something had actually gone wrong. He had met Min-jun in a freshman lecture hall 11 years earlier, two foreigners to each other's worlds, and somehow they had become brothers. "You started without me," Daniel said. "You're slow," Min-jun said, "and old. I'm the same age as you. You carry it worse." Daniel almost smiled. He nodded at the women, polite and unbothered. And they drifted away the moment they understood no more attention was coming, the way they always did. The three men had a rhythm to them, 10 years deep, worn smooth as riverstone. This was the truest thing in Min-jun's life, though he would have died before saying so out loud. These two, this table, the only people on earth who knew the boy behind the face and stayed anyway. They had a rule between them, one that had started as a joke a decade ago and hardened over the years into something like scripture. It had happened right here in the city, on a rooftop, the three of them young and broke and drunk on cheap soju and the certainty that they would rule the world. Ji-hoon's older sister had just gotten her heart broken by some boy, and Ji-hoon had been quietly wrecked by it, unable to fix his own sister's pain. And Daniel, steady even then, had said the thing that became law. Sisters are off limits. All of them. Forever. A man does not touch his brother's sister, no matter what. They had bumped their fists over it. They had even bought matching braided bracelets from a street vendor that same night. A stupid drunk idea that somehow none of them ever took off. 10 years later the bracelets were faded and fraying and still on their wrists. The rule had never once been tested, because it had never once needed to be. It was easy to keep a promise about a woman you had never met. "Speaking of sisters," Daniel said, and something in his voice made both of them look up. He was turning his glass slowly in his hand, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "I have news. Anita's moving to Seoul. Permanently." Ji-hoon lit up. "Little Anita? The one from the photos on your desk." "She's not little anymore. She's 27. She just took a job here, creative director for a big cosmetics company, and she's starting her own skincare line on top of it." The pride in his voice was a physical thing, warm and unmistakable. "She's the smartest person in our family. Smarter than me, definitely." "Low bar," Min-jun said. Daniel ignored him. "She's had a rough few years. There was an engagement in London. It ended badly." His jaw tightened, just slightly, the only crack in that steady surface. The guy was seeing someone else the whole time. She found out the week before the wedding. The table went quieter for a moment. Even Min-jun, who felt so little, felt the shape of that. "So," Daniel said, and now he looked directly at Min-jun, and the smile was still there, but underneath it was something made of steel. "She's coming here to start over. New city, new life, and she is completely, permanently, non-negotiably off limits." He lifted his wrist, the frayed bracelet catching the light. "Bro code. Say it." Min-jun laughed and raised his own wrist without a second thought, because it cost him nothing, because it was the easiest promise in the world, because he could not imagine a single circumstance under which it would ever matter. "Sisters are off limits," he said. "Relax, Daniel. I would never." "I mean it, Min-jun." Daniel's eyes did not waver. "You're my brother, but she's my blood. If you ever hurt her the way you hurt them, brother or not, I will end you." "Understood." Min-jun clinked his glass against Daniel's. "Honestly, from everything you've said, she sounds terrifying. Smart, successful, hates men with bad reputations. She'd take one look at me and run." "She'd take one look at you," Ji-hoon said, "and file a police report." They laughed. The three bracelets touched over the middle of the table. The pact held, unbreakable, exactly as it had for 10 years. Min-jun went home alone that night, as he always did after the noise burned off, to a penthouse the size of a small hotel with floor-to-ceiling windows and not one single photograph on the walls. He poured himself a drink he didn't want and stood looking out over the glittering city, 31 years old and successful beyond anything the boy at the window could have dreamed, and completely, perfectly alone. He preferred it that way. He told himself he preferred it that way. He had no idea that 3,000 miles away, a woman was zipping a suitcase closed, a woman who had already heard his name and already despised everything it stood for, a woman who was about to walk into his carefully guarded life and take it apart one patient day at a time. He had made a promise on a rooftop 10 years ago, and again, just that night. He was going to break it. He just didn't know it yet. Anita Okafor did not believe in fresh starts. She believed in work. She landed at Incheon on a gray Tuesday morning with 2 suitcases, a signed lease, and a heart she had welded shut 3 years ago and had no intention of reopening. Seoul spread out beyond the airport windows, vast and gleaming and utterly indifferent to her, and that suited her fine. She had not come here to be charmed. She had come here to build something no man could take from her. She was, by any honest measure, stunning. The kind of beautiful that made rooms go quiet, warm brown skin and sharp, elegant features, and a way of carrying herself that said she had stopped seeking anyone's approval a long time ago. But if you had told her she was beautiful, she would have thanked you the way you thank someone for commenting on the weather, because she had learned the hard and expensive way that beauty was not protection. She had been beautiful when her fiancé was seeing another woman behind her back for the entire length of their engagement. Beauty had not saved her from finding the other woman's earrings in their bed 1 week before the wedding. So she had packed up her whole London life, her shattered engagement, her humiliation, and she had rebuilt herself from the studs out. New job, new country, new rule, the only rule that mattered now. Never again would she let a charming man with a reputation anywhere near her heart. She could spot the type from across a room. She had married the type almost. She would never make that mistake twice. Her brother was waiting at arrivals, and the moment she saw Daniel, her armor cracked just a little, because Daniel was home in the shape of a person. He wrapped her in a hug that lifted her off her feet. "You're really here," he said into her hair. "I'm really here." She pulled back and looked at him, her steady, gentle giant of a brother, the one man on earth who had never once let her down. "Don't cry. You'll set me off." "I'm not crying. I have something in my eye. It's both eyes." She laughed, and it surprised her how easily it came with him. He drove her to her new apartment, a bright, clean space in a good neighborhood that he had personally vetted, and over the next few days he folded her back into his life with the quiet competence he brought to everything. He showed her the good markets and the bad ones. He taught her which subway lines to trust, and he told her, warmly and often, about his friends, the 2 brothers he had made in the city, the ones he wanted her to meet. "Ji-hoon you'll love," Daniel said. "He's an idiot, but the good kind. And Min-jun." He paused, and something careful entered his voice. "Min-jun is my best friend. He's a good man underneath. But I'll be honest with you, because you're my sister, and I don't lie to you. His reputation with women is bad, genuinely bad. He's not someone I'd ever want you near in that way." Anita's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes went cold and certain. "Daniel, I already know the type. Trust me, there is no version of this world where I go near a man like that." "Good," Daniel said, relieved. "Then we understand each other." She had, in fact, already looked Han Min-jun up. Of course she had. She was a woman who did her research. One search of his name, and the internet had vomited up a decade of it, the fashion CEO, the endless rotation of models and heiresses and actresses on his arm, the nickname the gossip sites used like it was his actual name, the Heartbreaker. She had read 3 articles, felt her stomach turn, and closed the tab. She knew exactly who Han Min-jun was before she ever laid eyes on him, which is why, when she finally did lay eyes on him, she was not impressed for even a single second. It happened at a restaurant, a welcome dinner Daniel had arranged so his sister could meet his brothers. Anita arrived first with Daniel. Ji-hoon came next, and Daniel had been right. She loved him instantly. He made her laugh within 90 seconds and told her 3 embarrassing stories about her brother before the appetizers came. And then Min-jun walked in. She watched it happen the way you watch a magician you've already seen the trick of. He entered the room, and the room adjusted around him. Waiters straightening, heads turning, the very air seeming to lean his way. He was, she granted him privately, ridiculously handsome, more so in person than in any photo, which was somehow worse. He moved with the loose, easy confidence of a man who had never once been told no. He greeted Daniel with a warm embrace, ribbed Ji-hoon, and then he turned the full wattage of that famous smile on her. "So," he said, sliding into the seat across from her, eyes doing the thing she'd read that they did, that trick of making a woman feel briefly like the center of the universe. You must be the terrifying little sister. Daniel's told me nothing but warnings. He's told me about you too, Anita said pleasantly. All good things, I hope. No. She smiled, sweet as sugar, and picked up her menu. None of it. Ji-hoon made a sound like a kettle. Daniel hid a smile behind his water glass. Min-jun blinked. This was not the usual opening move. He recovered smoothly, leaning in, the smile widening into something more interested. You shouldn't believe everything you hear. I don't, Anita said. I believe what I read, and I read quite a lot before I came. She set the menu down and looked at him directly for the first time, and her gaze was calm and cool and completely unmoved. And it did something to him that no woman's gaze had done in longer than he could remember. It saw him. Not the face, not the money, not the charm. It looked straight through all of it to the man underneath and found him wanting. You're exactly the kind of man, she said, not unkindly, almost gently, the way you'd state a simple fact, that I promised myself I would never, ever go near. And then she turned to Ji-hoon and asked him another question about her brother, and just like that, she was done with Han Min-jun. For the first time in his adult life, a woman had rejected him before he had even begun. Not played hard to get, not teased. Rejected, cleanly and completely, and then lost interest, as if he were a coat she'd tried on and decided against. Min-jun sat there with his famous smile fixed on his face and felt something he had not felt in 15 years. He felt seen, and he could not tell if he hated it or if it was the most interesting thing that had ever happened to him. Across the table, Daniel watched his sister charm Ji-hoon and his best friend sit oddly quiet and thought with great satisfaction that he had absolutely nothing to worry about. It started as these things do with coffee. Anita's new job was a beautiful, brutal machine. Creative director for a global cosmetics brand by day. And every hour that wasn't spoken for she poured into her own skincare line, the thing that was truly hers. She worked until the cleaning staff turned the lights off around her. She ate standing up. She was building a fortress out of productivity, and she had no time and less interest in the men of Seoul. But the men of Seoul, or one man in particular, apparently had time for her. He didn't flirt. That was the strange part, the part that kept catching her off guard. If Han Min-jun had flirted, she'd have known exactly what to do with him. She'd built her whole defense around the flirting type. But he didn't. He just started being there. The first coffee appeared on her desk on a Wednesday, no note, just a cup, and it was made exactly the way she liked it, oat milk, 1 sugar, a detail she was certain she'd never told him. She assumed it was an assistant's mistake and drank it anyway. Then it happened again on Friday, and the following Tuesday. By the 3rd week, she was standing in the lobby of her building when a car pulled up and Min-jun leaned across to push the door open. You have the Hyundai meeting across the river, he said. Traffic's bad on the bridge. Get in, I know a back way. How do you know my schedule? Daniel worries. I listen. He nodded at the passenger seat. I'm not going to bite. Ask your brother. I'm harmless before noon. She got in because she was late, not because of him. She told herself that firmly the whole way there. But he did know a back way, and he got her to the meeting early, and he explained on the drive exactly how the Korean executives would expect the negotiation to unfold. The bows, the pacing, the things left unsaid. Business customs she'd have stumbled through blind. She walked into that meeting armed, and she closed the deal, and she hated a little that some of that was because of him. Thank you, she said stiffly when he dropped her back. That was genuinely helpful. I know. He smiled, but it wasn't the wattage smile, the one she'd braced against. It was smaller, real. Same time tomorrow. You have the packaging supplier at 10. He didn't wait for her to agree. He just drove off. This was how it went for weeks. He drove her to meetings and never once made it feel like a favor he was collecting on. He waited outside her office in the evenings, not saying much, just walking her home through the soft Seoul dark so she wouldn't do it alone. He learned that she took her tea a completely different way than her coffee and started getting both right. He never pushed. He never leaned in. He never said one single line she could file under the Heartbreakers playbook, and it drove her quietly insane, because she could not figure out what his angle was. And in her experience, every man had an angle. What do you want? She finally demanded one evening. stopping dead on the sidewalk. From me. What is this? Nobody does this for nothing. Minjun stopped too. He considered the question seriously, which was itself unusual. I don't know, he admitted. That's the honest answer. I've never done this before. I'm not entirely sure how it works. He shrugged, and there was something almost bewildered in it. I just like being around you. You're the first person in a long time who looks at me and doesn't want anything. It's restful. Is that allowed? She didn't have an answer for that. She walked the rest of the way home in silence, and she did not invite him up, but she also did not tell him to stop coming. The night everything shifted, she almost didn't let him in at all. She'd had a brutal day. A supplier had fallen through. Her chest ached with the particular homesickness that comes on hard when you're tired and far away, and she wanted her mother's kitchen and the smell of home and nothing that Seoul could give her. There was a knock. She opened the door, already composing the words to send him away. Minjun was standing there covered in flour. Not a little flour. Flour in his hair. Flour up both forearms. A smear of it across one cheekbone. The great immaculate Han Minjun, looking like he'd lost a fight with a bakery. Okay, he said before she could speak. Don't laugh. I've been trying for 4 hours, and I think I've almost got it. But I need you to taste it and tell me the truth, because I have no frame of reference, and I might have invented a war crime. Got what? She said. He stepped aside. On the counter behind him, in her own kitchen, which he'd apparently talked his way into with her building manager, was a pot of jollof rice and a plate of fried plantains. Nigerian food. Home food. He'd found recipes, sourced the ingredients across half of Seoul, and destroyed her kitchen trying to make her the meal she missed most in the world. And he'd gotten flour absolutely everywhere for reasons that had nothing to do with either dish. Why is there flour? She said faintly. I don't want to talk about the flour. And Anita Okafor, who had not truly laughed in 3 years, who had welded her heart shut and thrown away the key, looked at this ridiculous, flour-covered, impossible man standing in her wrecked kitchen, holding out a plate of home, and she laughed. She laughed until her eyes streamed and her stomach hurt and she had to sit down on the floor. And Minjun sat down across from her grinning like a boy, and something that had been frozen solid in her for 3 years cracked clean down the middle. The jollof was terrible, by the way. She told him so. He looked so wounded, she almost lied. But he'd tried. That was the thing she couldn't get past, lying awake that night. He hadn't bought her flowers or thrown money at the problem. He'd spent 4 hours failing at something just to give her a single taste of home. That wasn't the Heartbreaker's playbook. That wasn't any playbook she knew. She was in trouble. She knew it, and it terrified her. Because every time he did something sweet, a colder voice spoke up underneath it. This is how it starts. This is exactly how it started last time. The gifts, the attention, the feeling of being the only girl in the world. Right up until the earrings in the bed. Whenever he looked at her a beat too long, she heard her ex's voice saying, "Trust me." She had trusted a charming man once. It had cost her everything. She could not do it again. So she warmed slowly, and she fought it the whole way. But she stopped pretending she didn't want him around. They started spending real time together, the kind that isn't going anywhere and isn't in a hurry. They walked the Han River at night, miles of it, the water black and glittering beside them, talking about everything and nothing. He taught her to ride a bicycle along the river path, which she'd somehow never learned, running behind her holding the seat and swearing he wouldn't let go and then letting go and howling with laughter as she wobbled and shrieked and stayed up. She taught him Nigerian slang, delighting in his terrible accent, making him say things in front of Daniel that made Daniel choke on his drink. They argued constantly and passionately about whose food was superior, an argument with no possible winner that they both refused to concede. She fell asleep on his shoulder on a late train home one night, and he sat perfectly still for 40 minutes, so as not to wake her, and when the air conditioning made her shiver, he draped his jacket over her without a word, and she woke at her stop pretending she hadn't felt him do it. He found out, somehow, that she hadn't celebrated her birthday since the engagement fell apart, that she'd let 3 of them pass in silent grief. So on her 28th, he filled a rooftop with warm lights and every Nigerian dish he could find a real cook to make No flower disasters this time, and invited Daniel and Ji-hoon and the small handful of friends she'd made in the city. And when she stepped out and saw that someone had paid attention, had cared enough to give her back a day she'd stopped letting herself have, she cried for the second time since London. Good tears this time. Daniel watched her that night and felt something he couldn't name, a flicker of unease he pushed down. He saw the way Min-jun watched his sister. He didn't want to see it, so he didn't. And through all of it, month after month, the thing nobody could quite believe, the heartbreaker didn't stray. He didn't go to the lounges. He didn't collect numbers. He didn't flirt with a single other woman. He changed, quietly, without announcement, without asking for credit. Ji-hoon noticed first and said nothing, watching his friend with a kind of wonder. Then came Paris. It was work, officially. Anita's cosmetics brand had a launch there, and she needed to go, and Min-jun had a fashion show during the same week, which he swore was a coincidence, and which was absolutely not a coincidence. They flew out separately and met in a city built entirely, it seemed, to dismantle two people who had sworn off love. The first 2 days they were both working, catching each other in hotel lobbies, texting between meetings. But on the third evening, both of them suddenly free. Min-jun knocked on her hotel door and said, "Put on good shoes. I'm not letting you see Paris through a conference window." And he showed her the city. Not the postcard Paris, though there was some of that too. He walked her along the Seine as the lights came on, bought her a terrible crepe from a cart and a good one from a shop to prove a point, took her up through Montmartre as the sun went down over the whole golden city. They stood at the top, and Paris glittered beneath them like something spilled from heaven, and neither of them said anything for a long time. "I have to tell you something," Anita said finally, quietly, still looking out the city, "and I need you to just let me say it. Okay. I am so scared of you." Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. "You have done everything right. For months. You have been patient and kind, and you have never once given me a reason not to trust you. And that terrifies me more than if you'd been awful, because he was patient and kind too in the beginning. Every man who ever destroyed a woman was patient and kind in the beginning." She turned to look at him then, and her eyes were wet and fierce. "So I need to know, is this real? Or am I the longest game you've ever played?" Min-jun looked at her under the lights of a city that had watched a million confessions, and for once in his charming, careful life he did not reach for a single clever thing to say. "I have spent my whole life," he said slowly, "making sure no one could ever hurt me the way my father hurt my mother. I hurt them first. I left first. I never stayed long enough to lose anything." He swallowed. "And then you rejected me at a dinner table before I'd said 10 words, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and somewhere in the last few months I did the one thing I swore I'd never do." He took a breath. "I let someone matter. You matter. You're not a game, Anita. You're the first thing in my life that was never a game, and it scares me exactly as much as it scares you." The Paris wind moved between them. Somewhere below, a street musician was playing something soft. She didn't kiss him. Not yet, not there. She was Anita, and she didn't hand her heart to anyone easily, not even on a hill in Paris with the whole city glowing. But she reached out and took his hand, and she didn't let go for the rest of the night. They walked back down through Montmartre with their fingers laced together, two people who had each promised themselves never again, quietly breaking that promise step by step. And Min-jun, who had never in his life wanted the morning to come slower, found himself praying this particular night would never end. He was happier than he had ever been. He had also, in that exact moment, fully and completely broken the bro code. And he had not told Daniel a single word. They came back from Paris different, and everyone who loved them could see it, though only 2 people knew why. Something had loosened in Anita. The fortress she'd built out of work and caution still stood, but she'd started leaving the gate open just for him. She still fought the fear, still heard the cold voice some nights, but she'd stopped running from the warmth. And Min-jun, for the first time in his life, was living inside something instead of walking away from it. They stopped hiding how much time they spent together, or at least they told themselves they weren't hiding, which is a different thing. He started cooking for her properly, having actually learned now, No more flower catastrophes. Sunday evenings became theirs. She'd come to his enormous empty penthouse, the one with no photographs on the walls, and slowly it stopped being empty. A pair of her shoes by the door, her tea in his cupboard. A framed photo appeared one day, the two of them squinting into the sun on the hill in Montmartre, the first photograph he had ever hung in that apartment in the years he'd lived there. He didn't mention it. She noticed it. Neither of them said anything, but she reached over and squeezed his hand. "You know you're the first thing on these walls," she said softly. "I know," he said. "I was waiting for something worth looking at." They took a weekend to Busan when the city got too loud, drove down the coast with the windows open and her music filling the car. Terrible Nigerian Afrobeats that he pretended to hate and secretly started humming in the shower. They stayed in a little place overlooking the sea. She woke early and found him already awake, watching her, and when she asked why, he said, "I keep thinking you'll be gone in the morning. I'm not used to people staying." She kissed him then, slow, and told him she wasn't going anywhere, and watched him believe it a little more than he had the day before. They built a whole language of small things. She learned he hummed when he was happy, an unconscious tell, and she started keeping quiet just to catch him doing it. He learned that she pressed her lips together right before she cried, and he'd have her laughing before the tears could fall. She rearranged his sterile kitchen into something warm. He learned to make her morning tea before she was fully awake and press it into her hands. He took her to a Hannock village one gray Sunday. Old wooden houses and paper lanterns and stone paths worn smooth by centuries, and they wandered it for hours holding hands. And she caught him watching a young family, a father lifting a laughing toddler onto his shoulders, and she saw something cross his face she'd never seen before. Longing. The man who never wanted forever, wanting it. "You'd be good at that," she said quietly. "At what?" "That." She nodded at the father and child. "The thing you're scared of." He didn't answer, but he pulled her a little closer and they walked on. They had a rhythm now, a life, folding quietly together. He waited out the rain with an umbrella outside her office because he knew she never carried one. She started leaving him voice notes during her long work nights, just her voice narrating small nothings, and he saved everyone. They fought sometimes, real fights because she was stubborn and he was proud, but the fights ended in laughter more often than not, and neither of them stormed off because he had learned to stay and she had learned to let him. One night, curled against him on his couch with the whole glittering city spread out below the windows, she said the thing she'd been circling for weeks. "I think I trust you." She said it to the window, not to him, like a confession she could barely believe she was making. "I didn't think I'd ever say that to a man again, and I still get scared. But I think somewhere in the middle of all the coffee and the terrible jollof in Paris and you humming in the shower when you think I can't hear, I started trusting you without noticing." Minjun was quiet for a long moment. When she looked up, his eyes were wet. "Say it again," he said. "I trust you." He held her tighter and didn't trust his voice to answer. He was, in that moment, the happiest and most terrified he had ever been. Happy because he had never had this warm, ordinary miracle of a person choosing to stay. Terrified because he was building a whole life on top of a secret, and secrets he knew better than anyone always come due. Because in all these months, in all this love, there was one conversation he kept not having. One phone call he kept not making. Daniel still didn't know. Every Sunday dinner, every group chat, every time his brother clapped him on the shoulder and called him a good man, the truth sat in Minjun's chest like a stone. He told himself he was waiting for the right moment. He told himself he'd find the words. But the truth, the real truth, was that he was a man who had spent his whole life avoiding the hard conversation, leaving before the reckoning came. And some part of him, the old cowardly part he thought Anita had cured, was still hoping he'd never have to have it at all. He should have told Daniel himself. He was about to lose the chance. Daniel found out on an ordinary Tuesday, which is how the worst things always arrive. He was leaving a cafe near Anita's office when he saw them across the street. It was raining, and Minjun stood outside her building holding an umbrella, waiting. And when Anita came out, he lifted it over her head automatically, the practiced ease of 1,000 small repetitions. She said something. He laughed, that unguarded laugh Daniel had heard maybe twice in 11 years. And then Anita went up on her toes and kissed him, quick and familiar, and walked into the rain on his arm looking like a woman who had been in love for a long time. Daniel stood in the drizzle and felt the ground move under him. He didn't confront them that day. He went home and sat in the dark and let it reassemble every dinner, every outing, every time Min-jun had happened to be free. It had been happening the whole time, right in front of him, and he had chosen not to see it. And the thing that broke something in his chest was not that they were together. It was that no one had told him. He called Min-jun that night. The rooftop. Tomorrow. Just us. Min-jun heard it in his voice and knew. The rooftop was the same one, where 3 broke young men had made a promise a decade ago. Daniel stood at the railing and didn't turn around. How long, he said. Daniel. How long, Min-jun? Since Paris. But it started before that. Months before. Daniel nodded slowly. Months. Every Sunday. Every dinner. Every time I called you my brother. And meant it. You were with my sister and said nothing. Yes. When Daniel finally turned, his face wasn't angry. It was hurt. Raw. The hurt of a man whose trust had been misplaced. Do you know why I made that rule? His voice shook. It was never about you. It was about her. I watched a man take her apart in London. I watched her come home a ghost. I watched her stop celebrating her own birthday because she couldn't stand the thought of being loved again. His jaw worked. And of every man in this city, the one who ends up in her life is the one with the worst reputation of anyone I know. My own best friend. The one man I know for a fact leaves. His voice cracked. How am I supposed to sleep knowing that when you get bored, it'll be my sister at the window this time? Not ego. Not pride. A brother terrified of watching his sister destroyed a second time. Min-jun took all of it. You're right. About who I was. I was that man. I hurt people so they couldn't hurt me first. I never stayed. He met Daniel's eyes. But I didn't choose this. I fought it. I knew the rule, and I still couldn't stop it, because for the first time in my life someone saw exactly who I was and stayed anyway. I'd rather lose you than go back to being the man I was before her. That's not your choice to make. You made a promise. On this roof. I know. Get out, Daniel said. I can't look at you. Min-jun left. The friendship, 10 years deep, cracked straight down the middle. And when Anita learned how Daniel had found out, something in her folded quietly closed. She came to Min-jun's penthouse, the one with her shoes by the door and their Paris photo on the wall, and he knew from her face what she'd come to say. He's my brother, she said, crying. He crossed the world for me. He put himself back together just to put me back together after London. I will not be the thing that destroys the most important friendship of his life. We have to stop, until he can forgive us. If he can. Okay, Min-jun whispered, because he loved her, and for once loving her meant not chasing what he wanted. She kissed him one last time, took her shoes from by the door and left. They tried to stop. God, they tried. They lasted 9 days. It was Anita who broke first, though she'd never admit it, appearing at his door on the 10th night in the rain, and neither of them said a word, and he pulled her inside, and that was the end of stopping. So began the low-key months. They couldn't be apart, and they couldn't be seen. So they became careful, quiet, hidden. She'd tell Daniel she was working late and come to the penthouse instead, curtains drawn against the city. They stopped going anywhere they might be recognized. No restaurants, no river walks, no rooftops. They met in small, out-of-the-way places, a tiny film cafe in a neighborhood neither of them knew, a quiet gallery on a weekday morning. Every time, one of them would say, "This is the last time. This isn't fair to Daniel. We have to actually stop." And every time, they'd fold right back into each other, because the love simply would not die no matter how they starved it. The guilt sat on both of them like a stone. They were doing the exact thing that had broken Daniel's heart, all over again, in secret again. Anita hated who it made her, a woman lying to the brother she worshipped. Min-jun hated that he dragged her into his oldest specialty, the hidden thing, the unspoken truth. But hating it changed nothing. They'd try to leave each other in the doorway and end up standing there for an hour unable to let go. There was a night it nearly ended everything. Daniel dropped by Anita's apartment unannounced with takeout, brotherly and warm, and Min-jun was there, and they had 4 frozen seconds of pure terror before Min-jun slipped out the service stairwell while Anita answered the door with her heart slamming. Sure, her face was giving everything away. Daniel didn't notice, but Min-jun's jacket was on her couch, and she sat through an hour of dinner with her brother staring at that jacket, sick with guilt, and when Daniel finally left, she pressed her back against the door and slid to the floor and cried because she couldn't keep doing this to him and she couldn't stop. What none of them counted on was that Daniel, for all his hurt, was not a stupid man and not a cruel one. As the weeks passed and the anger cooled into something he could see around, he started, almost against his will, to watch. And slowly he realized the truth. They hadn't stopped. He caught the signs a careful man catches. Anita's late nights that didn't match her workload. The way she'd gone quiet and glowing and guilty all at once. A glimpse of the two of them once. Through the window of a little film cafe in a part of town neither of them had any reason to be. Sitting close, foreheads nearly touching, not touching, aching. And here is the thing that turned him. He expected the discovery to enrage him further. This second betrayal. This proof they'd lied again. But it didn't, because a man who'd simply gotten what he wanted and moved on would have let go the moment it got hard. Instead, his best friend, the famous heartbreaker, the man who left everyone, was risking the last shred of Daniel's forgiveness, sneaking around film cafes like a lovesick kid. All for a woman he wasn't even allowed to be seen with. Men like the old Min-jun didn't do that. Only a man truly in love did that. Their failure to stay apart was the very thing that convinced him it was real. He watched more. He saw Min-jun still standing in the rain outside Anita's office on the days they weren't meeting, umbrella up, asking nothing. He saw the Gangnam lounges had gone months without him. He saw his sister laugh, and then saw her face fall when she thought no one watched, wearing the exact grief of someone loving a person she was trying to give up. And one evening, on that same rooftop, Ji-hoon finally said it, no jokes left in him. You made that rule to protect her from bad men. I've watched your best friend for weeks, Daniel, standing in the rain, sneaking around like a fool for a woman he can't even take to dinner, giving up the only life he ever knew and asking nothing back. His hand landed on Daniel's shoulder. They tried to stop, for you, and they couldn't because it's real. Has it occurred to you that maybe he stopped being one of the bad men the day he met her? You keep trying to protect Anita from the man Min-jun used to be. But that man is gone. She's the one who killed him. Daniel didn't answer, but the words went in and stayed. He watched 2 more weeks. Then he made his decision. He sent Min-jun a single text. Same rooftop. The place it all began. Min-jun climbed the stairs certain he was walking into the end of everything. He'd lost Anita's peace of mind. He'd been caught sneaking around. Now he'd lose Daniel for good, and he'd earned it. He was ready to take it. On the small table between them sat one of the 3 braided bracelets they bought as broke kids on this very roof. Daniel's own, faded and frayed. Sit, Daniel said. Min-jun sat. For a long moment Daniel didn't speak. Then he pushed the bracelet an inch across the table. You broke the bro code, he said, and then you kept breaking it. You couldn't even stop when she asked you to. I know, Min-jun said quietly. I tried. We both tried. I'm not going to lie to you again. Daniel, not ever, so I'll tell you the truth. We couldn't. I'm sorry for the sneaking. I'm sorry you had to find out the way you did, twice. But I am not sorry I love her and I never will be. Daniel was quiet, and then, slowly the hard line of his face began to give. For 3 years, he said, my sister didn't laugh. Not really. I flew to London. I called her every day. I did everything a brother could do, and I couldn't fix her. I couldn't give her back to herself. He looked at Min-jun, eyes wet, and then some idiot covered himself in flour in her kitchen, and she laughed until she cried. You did the thing I couldn't do in 3 years of trying. You gave me my sister back. Min-jun couldn't speak. And when I told you to stop, Daniel went on rough, you couldn't. Neither could she. You risked the last of my forgiveness just to sit near each other in some cafe where nobody would see. He shook his head slowly. That's not the heartbreaker. The heartbreaker leaves the second it gets hard. This man couldn't leave if his life depended on it. He stood. That's not a man breaking my sister's heart. That's a man who can't live without her. And then Daniel Okafor pulled his best friend up off the chair into a fierce, crushing hug. 10 years of brotherhood catching and holding. Take care of her, Daniel said into his shoulder thick. Or, I swear I'll remind you exactly why I made that rule. Minjun laughed, a wet, broken, joyful sound. Every day. I swear it. At the bottom of the stairs Jihoon was waiting, and he took one look at their faces and burst into tears and immediately pretended he hadn't. And the three of them stood in the stairwell laughing and gripping each other's shoulders. 3 bracelets on 3 wrists. Brotherhood whole again. Spring came to Seoul all at once, the whole city bursting into cherry blossom overnight. Minjun brought Anita to a park drowning in pink, petals coming down like warm snow, and this time nothing was hidden, and Daniel stood a little way off with Jihoon, both grinning like fools, both families watching from beneath the flowering trees. He got down on one knee in the falling blossoms. I spent my whole life making sure no one could break my heart, and then you rejected me at a dinner table and broke it anyway, into a shape I didn't know it could be. You made me earn every single day. You made me become the man I should have been all along, one patient day at a time. His hands shook around the ring. Anita Okafor, I am not the man I was. You killed him, thank God. Marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life earning you. Anita, who had sworn she'd never love a man with a bad reputation, who had welded her heart shut 3 years and a lifetime ago, looked down at the reformed heartbreaker kneeling in the cherry blossoms, and she was not afraid. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at once. Yes. Daniel cheered. Jihoon openly sobbed and filmed it at the same time. The blossoms came down like a blessing. That night, after the families had gone home, after the celebrating, Anita curled against Minjun on his couch, in the penthouse that was fully hers now too, and there was a strange, quiet nervousness in her he hadn't seen since the early days. I have to tell you something, she said softly, and I need you to just let me say it. His heart stopped. Those were her Paris words. Okay. She took his hand and pressed it flat against her stomach, and looked up at him with tears standing in her eyes and the beginning of a smile trembling at her mouth. You're going to be a father. For the second time in his life, Han Minjun could not find a single clever thing to say. He looked at his hand on her stomach and then at her face and then back, and something broke open in his chest, the last locked room in a man who'd spent his whole life locking rooms, and he pulled her against him and held her like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. And he cried, and this time he didn't pretend he wasn't. A father, he whispered. Me. You. She laughed wetly into his shoulder. God help this child. He laughed too and held her, and then a thought surfaced, and he pulled back, eyes wide, half panic and half joy. Anita. He swallowed. Your brother. Daniel. He looked genuinely terrified, which, after everything, was almost funny. We just got him back. We just fixed everything. Today, this morning, in the cherry blossoms. If we tell him now that on top of everything else I've also gotten his little sister pregnant, he is going to throw me off that rooftop, and this time he will mean it. Anita snorted. He might. Please. Minjun took both her hands, pleading, a smile breaking through the fear. Let's just not tell him yet. Give me a little while. Let the man enjoy having his brother back for 5 minutes before he finds out he's about to be an uncle. I'll tell him. I swear I will. I'm done with secrets. All of them, forever, after this one. He kissed her knuckles. Just 1 more month. Let me stay alive 1 more month. Anita looked at this man, the reformed heartbreaker, the father of her child, begging for a stay of execution from her overprotective brother, and she started to laugh, really laugh, the deep helpless kind she thought she'd lost forever in London. 1 month, she agreed, grinning. But when he throws you off the roof, I'm not catching you. That's fair, Minjun said, and pulled her back into his arms. The two of them laughing in the dark, one last happy secret to keep, and the whole bright, unwritten future spread out before them like a city full of light. Because sometimes the man who breaks every heart is just a man who never met the one worth keeping. Sometimes the woman who swore off love is just waiting for someone willing to earn it, one patient day at a time. And sometimes the very best secrets are the ones you can't wait to finally tell. If this story moved you, don't leave without hitting that like button and subscribing, because stories like this are exactly what we do here. Tell me in the comments, would you have given Minjun a second chance like Anita did, or walked away for good? And should they tell Daniel about the baby, or let him sweat? I read every single one, and I'll see you in the next story.